Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today I am going to do a Friday Reads on November 9th. The week's kind of sucked, and I think we all know why. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to move pretty quickly into the content about this week's reading. But events of this week have definitely affected me, affected my reading, and I just want to acknowledge for a minute how helpful the Booktube community has been this week. I know for me, and I hope for you as well, because it's been a tough one. And I have, of course, spent a lot of time talking to friends and certain family members. Let's not talk about the entire family tree at this moment, but also my bookish friends, my booktube friends, viewers, and other channel content creators in different avenues, in comments and in groups that we are participating in, and messages and all of it, Discord, Voxer, everything. And it's really been helpful. And I have noticed with the people that I watch, people that I'm subscribed to, I would say there's basically three categories going on this week, and they are all so valid, and I appreciate everybody's responses this week. Some people are taking a break, and maybe they post a message that they're just not feeling it. They're taking some time off, and that is really helpful to me because that's a reminder that that's always okay. It is always valid to just step back and take some time off for any reason. And I will be happy to see them when they return. And then there's people who dived right into the center of it, and they have posted community posts or videos specifically talking about the election and politics, and that's valid too. And that is a great outlet for all of us that want to engage and talk about it. And then some people have posted content that is not about politics and is just aiming for something more comforting and distracting. And I appreciate that as well. And I enjoy being able to talk about other things. And so I have partaken of everything in this buffet this week, this dismay buffet, if you will. And it's been enormously helpful to me, and I hope that you feel like that as well. So I'm going to follow my normal format, even though I don't feel entirely normal. But we did watch a distracting show this week, The Diplomat Season 2. I think we were watching it the last time I talked, but it was good. It was better than the first season. It had lots of twists and turns and things that you predict, or then you didn't predict it right. And it ended on another cliffhanger like it did the first season. There's going to be a season 3, and it was just good fun. I thought that the writing and the dialogue was a lot better this year. The characters, it got more interesting and complicated with the main characters. I really enjoyed it. It was good old fashioned escapism. So we're just gonna go right on into the books. I did finish a couple of books this week, and I was finishing those books right about the time that things took an unfortunate turn in world events, and then it kind of shook up my layout for the rest of the week. But let's talk about what I did finish. I read All Yours by Claudia Pineiro, and I'm not going to talk about it very much because this is part of the Pineiro project, a group read that has expanded. It's pretty fun. It started out being about 3 books. Then we added this book because we found out that this one was a prequel, not a prequel, but it was written earlier, and then there's a sequel that was in our other pile. We got kind of excited and decided that we wanted to add in her other books that have been translated into English. So now the original project of 3 books, I think, is 7 books. And so the fun is just going to roll out longer and probably expand into the next year. And I'm all there for it because I really love this writer so far. So like I said, I can't get really into it. I'll talk about it when we finish reading it, but we've all been really enjoying this. It's a crime thriller, but the writing, the structure, and the characterization elevate it from just being just a slam bang murder thriller kind of book. That's all I'm gonna say, but It's fast and it was fun, but there was also a lot of things to talk about, which we're still talking about, so that's why I'm not going to talk about them now. The other one that I finished is also a poet by Ada Calhoun. The subtitle is Frank O'Hara, My Father and Me. And I talked about this some last week. This is about Ada Calhoun, who is a writer herself. She's written some books of her own. She's also a professional ghostwriter. And her father is Peter, I keep wanting to say Schlegel, but I think it's like Sheldal, well-known art critic. As a young man, he emulated Frank O'Hara, who was about 15 years older than him, and kind of followed in his footsteps, coming to New York, wanting to be a poet, and then he settled into his groove as an art critic. And in the 70s, he tried to write a biography of Frank O'Hara, and he got blocked off partway through the project by Frank's sister Maureen, who is in control of the estate, and she withdrew her permission to do the project. And so years later, it's 2018, and Ada Calhoun finds all these old cassette tapes in the basement of her parents' apartment in New York City, and it's all of the tapes where he interviewed all these people who knew Frank O'Hara. And he tells her about the failed project, and she decides that she wants to take it up. She has a theory that the reason why the project failed was because of Peter's abrasive personality. Her mother jokes that Peter should go around with a business card that says Peter Sheldal, burner of bridges, because he's kind of got a Larry David situation where he just rubs people the wrong way. He has lots of friends, but he's kind of difficult. He throws monkey wrenches into things. And as a father, he's problematic. She has spent many decades being perplexed by her father, who is very self-absorbed, totally focused on his work and his writing, and barely registers her existence. And this has been perennially frustrating for her. So she thinks she's going to write this book, get the job done. Her father's going to be impressed. The world will have this wonderful biography. And none of that is what happens. And instead we have this memoir where she explores a lot of other territory instead, about herself, her father, and Frank O'Hara, and his cohort of artists, writers, lovers, other people in his lifespan, which was cut short very tragically in 1966 in an accident. I wouldn't have been particularly interested in an entire full-length biography of Frank O'Hara, even though I really like his poetry, but this was quite engaging to me. Something came up in this book that came up in another book I'm reading, kind of by surprise and not planned, where she's examining the differences in her life as a writer from her father's, where he was very hands-off as a parent. He spends most of his life, including all through this work as an older man, closed up in his study, furiously writing. That's who he is. Even when he finds out that he has a very serious health problem, his first thought is, well, I need to still be able to write. That's all that's important to me. And he says these things right in front of his wife and his daughter, who are not surprised but not happy about this statement. And he just has this soul burning pursuit of his work all the way through his life, and the expense of that to other people. And in contrast, she's happily married. She has a son and a stepson, and she has the usual struggle of trying to balance time for her creative work with the responsibilities of family life, and the fact that she wants to be engaged in her family life. And she hears the stories of these women from the 50s and 60s and 70s who were basically cast aside or no longer found interesting by that society if they decided to marry and have children. They were just considered out of the game. But then on the other hand, if they never married and never had children, that was also considered a little unnatural too. So they just couldn't win. And she was thinking about that generation versus hers, and which things have improved and which have not, and that was all pretty interesting. And then she, even though she doesn't want to change the life she has, she found it interesting to imagine, well, what if I was a different kind of person who didn't have this family and I could be like my dad and just write for 18 hours at a time if I wanted to, and what would my body of work be like? Because she calls herself the second best writer in the family. So anyway, all that was very interesting to me, and I'll talk in a minute when I get to this other book about how these themes reappeared in a fiction work, because it's always very interesting when that happens and you didn't know it was coming, and all of a sudden there's connections or parallels somewhere else. So also a poet, really, I'm a character reader, so the fact that this was really about specifically Ada, Peter, Frank, and a whole bunch of supporting characters, and just the weird dynamics, I really got into it. And I did go on a little side trail of reading a lot of poetry, because she was also blocked by Maureen and did not get permission to use any of Frank's work in its entirety in the piece. She will refer to the poems and remind you that you can always go Google all of these things, because you can find the poetry on various websites, but she could not reprint them in the book. So I had my little collection, and I have my I have my phone to Google them, and I have other poems in other anthologies. And so yes, I had those little side project of reading Frank O'Hara. So after I finished those books, the floor had fallen out, and I didn't really feel like reading what I had planned next. And there were a couple of books from my nonfiction November list that Michael Clark and I were going to read together, and neither of us felt like starting those books. So we decided we'll kind of wait, maybe look next week, come back around, think about it. And it's kind of like when you're not well, and things that you usually really love to eat just don't sound right at all, and you think, well, that's my favorite, but not right now. That's how we felt about our reading selections. So we decided to just not do those right away. And Michael made this great suggestion to me. He said, because he knows that I read Catcher in the Rye just about every year, and I talked about it in my last video about how I find it to be very funny, even though it's a book about grief and loss and trauma and anxiety and somebody having a meltdown, a breakdown. It's still a comfort read to me, because I've read it so many times. And he said, well, if you haven't read it, maybe this is a good time to read Catcher in the Rye. And so I did start reading Catcher in the Rye again, which is a great choice for me, because if I'm distracted or I'm not focusing well, I'm not going to get confused or lose the plot, because it's emblazoned. I mean, entire passages are completely burned in my mind that I could quote. And so I did start reading this, and it is comforting me. And I'm just at the part, if you've read it, where Holden he's come into the city, and he's checked into the hotel. He's looked at the strange people through the windows, and he's about to go down and see if he can find somebody to dance with him in the lavender room. So that's where I'm at. And then the other book that I started reading is Colored Television by Danzy Senna. And I picked this one up because out of my possible reads and my 10 before the end, this was the one that was described as being funny. It just sounded like the content was sort of lighter, so I thought it would be a good choice. And this is the one that interestingly has an echoed theme, not just in the colors, but in the actual content. And I am enjoying this. There is a but, and I'll get to the but in a minute. That didn't sound right at all. So anyway, this is a book about a woman named Jane. I'm going to set it down. No, I'm not. This is a book about a woman named Jane who she lives in Los Angeles. She's a writer. She did a writing program. She had a really successful first book, but she has been stuck on her second book for a decade. And it has turned into this huge, giant, sprawling, multi-century covering project. And doesn't sound very good. It maybe it's either brilliant or it's horrible, and it has to do with what she calls mulattoes in history. And that is the term that she prefers instead of biracial. And that's also how she describes herself. We get an early backstory about how she met her husband Lenny, who is a painter. And then now in the present day, they live in LA, and she is struggling to write this book. She teaches in a writing program. He's also doing some teaching, and his paintings do not sell. And he is told time and again that this is because there's no indication in the content of his paintings that he is black. That if he just made it somehow clear that the paintings were by a black artist or had black topics, then people would want to buy them. And he's having no part of that because that's not what he is wanting to explore in his paintings. So he's not going to, he says, want to play into that. So he paints and doesn't sell anything, and he teaches, and she writes and doesn't finish anything, and she teaches, and they can't afford any of the housing in LA, and they have 2 children. And so at the beginning of our story, they have been spending a year house sitting in a beautiful house in the kind of, I think it's in the Hollywood Hills, of her friend Brett, who she went to the creative writing program with, and he has become a very successful film and TV writer. Is he just amazingly successful? Is he a giant sellout? Depends on who you ask. But he is her old friend, and they're living in his house for a year, and she's basically pretend playing that she lives in this neighborhood. She has fantasies about living in wealthy suburban multicultural neighborhoods. There's one that she's obsessed with that she calls Multicultural Mayberry. She likes to go to open houses there, and she is fantasizing about this while she drinks Brett's expensive wine collection and takes a sabbatical. She and her husband take a sabbatical to write and paint, and the idea is that relieved from the pressures of having to pay rent, they can take a break from their teaching obligations and just focus on their work. And she does finish the novel. This is all I'm going to tell you about that. At this point, the plot takes a different direction. So the thing that came up between these 2 books is that pressure and that struggle to be a creative person and also live in this everyday world with everyday expenses and raise a family. And she's just really savored this year where she can sit in Brett's writing studio and write and not have to get up and go to a job. And it's definitely an alternate reality. There was a scene in Also a Poet where Ada had an opportunity. She went to a 2-week writing retreat, and she was so excited to win this spot and that she could just 24/7 immerse herself in writing. And her father makes this dismissive remark, like that writing colonies are pretentious or fake or something. And Ada's mother turns to her dad and says, "Your entire life has been a writer's colony." And I thought that was a great comeback because he's never had to work within a 9-to-5 structure, and he just writes. Lenny kind of plays that role in this book. He likes to make dismissive comments or criticisms, and Ada she doesn't always say it, but she kind of thinks, yeah, but why is that bad? Why is that bad to want all these things? Why is it bad to want to be successful and have enough money to not feel anxious and squeezed all the time? Is that really so bad? So that's at the heart of this all. But I do have a blooming problem that I'm not sure I really like Jane. I don't have to like Jane. That doesn't make the book good or bad. But she's making some choices that at first I thought, and now it's kind of moving towards maybe an actual really, really problematic choice. That's all I'm going to say. Things are getting tense in a different way. I'll say more about it next week. I said a lot, but I'll say more when I can sum up how I felt and how the plot went. So that is what I'm reading. I set aside Never Whistle at Night. I lost my taste for the dark stuff, the horror, the creepy. It felt right out of my psyche, and I didn't feel like reading it. So I'm just going to put it away and bring it back out when that mood comes around. I'm just going to finish these two books that I'm reading and then see where I stand. I know I have some other group and buddy read things that will be starting as the month unfolds, and I have plenty of books in my 10 before the end that I can sift through and find the ones that seem to fit my current mood. So that is where I'm at. I hope that you are doing okay. I hope that you have found a way to funnel your reading life in a way that is comforting or helpful to you. And I will be back. I don't know what I'm doing on Tuesday. I will think about that. And but I will see you soon. Have a good weekend. Goodbye.